At an electronics store, a black teenage girl walks in excited to buy a microcontroller, but she freezes when she meets the manager's suspicious glare and the clerk's cold disdain. Their suspicions quickly turn into baseless accusations when a wealthy shopper claims the black teenager had shoplifted something. Minutes later, police burst in, blindly handcuffing her. But what they didn't know was that this teenager had a powerful ally, her mother, ready to turn the entire situation upside down in ways none of them expected. The Saturday afternoon sun blazed through the glass ceiling of Oakbrook Center Mall as 17-year-old Sophia Johnson pushed through the revolving doors, her backpack heavy with textbooks and dreams. The mall buzzed with typical weekend energy, families dragging shopping bags filled with back-to-school supplies, teenagers clustering around the food court sharing pizza and gossip, elderly couples power-walking their afternoon exercise routine, and the steady hum of conversation mixing with pop music echoing from store speakers. Sophia's dark skin glistened with a thin layer of sweat from the oppressive Chicago heat, her natural curls bouncing with each determined step toward the electronics section. She couldn't stop smiling when she thought about her mother's expression when she saw the MIT letter. All those years of staying up until midnight doing calculus homework, all those science fair victories, all those AP classes finally paying off in the most spectacular way possible. The acceptance letter was folded carefully in her Hello Kitty backpack from middle school, now stuffed tight with advanced calculus books, robotics sketches covered in mathematical equations, her laptop covered in engineering stickers, and most importantly, that precious piece of paper with Massachusetts Institute of Technology printed across the top in official crimson lettering. Her robotics project for the state science fair needed just one more component: an Arduino microcontroller that would complete her disaster relief robot design. The robot was intended to navigate through earthquake rubble and locate survivors using thermal imaging and sound detection, potentially saving hundreds of lives in future disasters. If everything went according to plan, she'd be presenting her creation to judges next month, competing against the best young minds in Illinois and hopefully changing the world one innovation at a time. Sophia had spent the previous night fine-tuning her project proposal, calculating the exact specifications needed for the microcontroller that would serve as the brain of her robot. She'd researched every electronics store in the Chicago area, comparing prices and availability, and TechWorld had the best selection at the most reasonable prices. Her mother, Major Isabella Johnson, had given her $300 from her military pace money that Isabella had saved by eating MREs instead of ordering takeout, by skipping movies and entertainment, by sacrificing her own small luxuries so her daughter could pursue excellence. However, as Sophia entered TechWorld, the largest electronics store in the mall, she immediately noticed something that made her stomach tighten with the familiar dread that came from years of navigating predominantly white spaces. William Davis, the store manager, appeared around the corner of the smartphone display like a predator emerging from tall grass, his pale, sweaty face already set in a permanent frown of suspicion before he'd even seen what she was looking for. His small beady eyes tracked her every movement with the intensity of a security camera, while his thin lips remained twisted downward in an expression that suggested he'd already decided she didn't belong there. Sophia could feel the oppressive weight of his stare following her as she made her way through the Arduino section, each step feeling increasingly unwelcome. The difference in treatment became painfully obvious within minutes when a middle-aged white man in an expensive business suit approached the customer service counter asking about tablet specifications for his company. William's entire demeanor transformed instantly, as if someone had flipped a switch from hostile to helpful. His face brightened with genuine enthusiasm, his posture straightened with attentive respect, and his voice took on the warm professional tone that Sophia would never hear directed at her. "How can I help you today, sir? Looking for anything specific for your business? We've got some fantastic deals on the latest iPad models, and I'd be happy to set up a corporate account for bulk pricing. Can I get you some coffee while we discuss your needs?" The stark contrast was like watching someone perform two completely different personalities within the same space. But when Sophia picked up an Arduino starter kit to examine the technical specifications printed on the back of the package, William materialized beside her within seconds, moving with the speed of someone who had been watching and waiting for an excuse to intervene. His voice cut through the air like shards of ice, loud enough for other customers to hear and turn their heads. You planning to actually buy that expensive equipment, or are you just looking around wasting my time? Because if you're not serious about purchasing, there are other customers who actually have money to spend. The words hit Sophia like physical blows, each syllable designed to humiliate and diminish her in front of the other shoppers who had begun to stare. Feeling the pressure from his suspicious glare and the growing attention from other customers, Sophia made a decision that she hoped would change his perception of her. She carefully extracted her MIT acceptance letter from her backpack, unfolding the official document with its embossed letterhead and formal language of acceptance. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out for him to see, hoping that her academic achievements would somehow make him see her as a person worthy of basic respect. "I'm an MIT student, sir. I just need this Arduino for my robotics project that's competing in the state science fair. Here's my acceptance letter if you need verification of my student status." William barely glanced at the letter before letting out a dismissive laugh that seemed to echo through the store, attracting even more unwanted attention from curious shoppers. "Yeah, right, sweetheart. Anyone with a computer and printer can make fake college letters nowadays. You kids think you're so clever with your little forgeries, but I've been in retail for 15 years. I know all the tricks, all the scams, all the sob stories. That fancy fake paperwork isn't going to convince me you belong in a store like this." The casual dismissal of her greatest achievement, the culmination of years of academic excellence, hit Sophia like a physical assault. Her chest tightened with a mixture of humiliation, anger, and disbelief that her MIT acceptance could be so easily dismissed as fraudulent. But she maintained her composure the way her mother had taught her during countless conversations about navigating hostile environments. Major Isabella Johnson had prepared her daughter for moments like this, teaching her to respond to prejudice with dignity rather than anger, to let facts speak louder than emotions. Even with her credentials displayed and her polite explanation given, William continued to hover nearby like a persistent shadow, straightening products she hadn't touched, repositioning items on shelves that were already perfectly organized, and asking repeatedly with increasing aggression if she actually intended to purchase anything, or if she was just window shopping in a store above her pay grade. This was the familiar suffocating weight of being watched, judged, and found guilty of the crime of existing while black in a space that clearly didn't welcome her presence or believe in her potential. What Sophia didn't realize was that she was about to become the target of something far more sinister and calculated than casual retail prejudice. Charlotte Thompson, a 52-year-old woman with platinum blonde hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her already pinched face into a permanent expression of disdain, had been observing the interaction from across the store with the predatory focus of someone planning an attack. Her designer heels clicked aggressively against the polished marble floor as she strutted through Tech World like she owned not just the store but the entire mall, her expensive Hermes purse swinging at her side as she positioned herself strategically near Sophia with the precision of a chess player, moving pieces into position. Charlotte had perfected this routine before during previous visits to upscale shopping centers, and her approach was methodical, calculated, and devastatingly cruel. She had developed a systematic method for targeting young people of color who dared to shop in spaces she considered her exclusive domain. Her technique involved careful observation, strategic positioning, and flawless execution of false accusations that relied on racial stereotypes and social prejudices to destroy her victims' reputations and futures. She deliberately placed herself near what she assumed was the security camera's blind spot while fumbling dramatically with her purse, secretly sliding her brand-new AirPods Pro FOC, still in their unopened packaging worth $249, into the bag's inner pocket where they would be safely hidden from view. What Charlotte didn't realize was that Tech World had recently upgraded their security system, installing smaller, more discreet cameras throughout the store, including a high-definition device mounted near the ceiling that had a perfect view of her actions. The camera was recording every calculated movement in crystal-clear detail, capturing her deliberate deception with the kind of evidence that would later prove devastating to her carefully constructed lies. James Wilson, the store's security guard, stood ready near the entrance with his hand hovering near his radio as if waiting for a predetermined signal. Wilson was a large, intimidating man who had worked private security for several years, and he had developed an unfortunate reputation for being overly aggressive with certain types of customers while remaining respectful and professional with others. His positioning near the exit suggested that this was not a spontaneous response to suspicious activity, but rather a coordinated effort that had been planned in advance. The atmosphere in the store grew thick with unspoken malice as three sets of predatory eyes, William's, Charlotte's, and James's, converged on one 17-year-old girl who simply wanted to buy components for a science project that could potentially save lives in disaster situations. Sophia's finely tuned instincts, honed by years of navigating similar situations in predominantly white spaces, began screaming internal warnings that made her heart race faster and her palms grow sweaty with anxiety. She tried desperately to focus on her shopping list and complete her purchase quickly, but the feeling of impending danger was becoming impossible to ignore. The air itself seemed to crackle with tension, like the moments before a violent thunderstorm unleashes its fury. That's when Charlotte made her move with the dramatic flair of a seasoned performer taking center stage. She began frantically searching through her purse with exaggerated panic, her voice rising to a pitch calculated to ensure everyone in the vicinity could hear her distress and witness what she was presenting as a crisis. "Oh my God, my AirPods are gone. Someone stole my brand new AirPods Pro. They cost $250. I just bought them this morning." Her manicured finger shot out like an accusatory weapon of mass destruction, pointing directly at Sophia, who was standing several feet away peacefully holding the Arduino kit she'd been examining for her robotics project. The gesture was so sudden and dramatic that it caused several nearby shoppers to freeze in place and turn their attention to the unfolding scene. It was her, that little ghetto thief took my AirPods. Look at her mumbly, never seen anything that expensive in her whole pathetic, miserable life. These people always think they can just walk into our spaces, our stores, our communities, and take whatever they want. They think just because they throw on some fake college gear and carry around forged acceptance letters, we're supposed to trust them and treat them like they belong here. I know exactly what she is, just another criminal looking for an easy target. The words ghetto, pathetic, miserable, these people, and criminal stabbed into Sophia's heart like multiple knives, each syllable carefully chosen and delivered with maximum cruelty. Charlotte's voice carried the venom of someone who had been waiting months for this exact moment, savoring each hateful word as it left her lips like she was tasting fine wine. Her attack was designed not just to accuse Sophia of theft, but to completely destroy her humanity in the eyes of everyone watching, reducing her from a brilliant MIT-bound student to nothing more than a racist stereotype. The growing crowd of onlookers began pulling out their phones with the speed of professional photographers, but instead of calling for help or questioning the accusation, they started recording what they automatically assumed would be the dramatic arrest of a teenage shoplifter. Their cameras were pointed at Sophia like weapons, ready to capture her humiliation and potentially destroy her future with viral videos that could follow her for the rest of her life. James Wilson moved quickly across the store to restrain Sophia, his heavy footsteps echoing against the marble floor like approaching thunder. Meanwhile, William Davis rushed to his phone behind the customer service counter to call both mall security and local police, his voice excited with the kind of vindication that comes from having one's prejudices seemingly confirmed. The speed and coordination of their response suggested this was not their first time executing this type of coordinated attack on a young customer of color. Sophia tried desperately to point to her MIT letter, which was still partially visible from her earlier attempt to prove her legitimacy and academic credentials. "Sir, you already saw my acceptance letter just 5 minutes ago. I'm an MIT student working on a robotics project for the state science fair. I didn't take anything from anyone. You can check the security cameras, they'll show I never went near this woman or her belongings." But William just sneered at her desperate plea with the satisfaction of someone who believed his racial prejudices were being validated in real time. "Oh please, drop the innocent act. You probably stole that fake letter too, just like everything else you've got. You think we're stupid? You think we don't see kids like you in here all the time, acting all innocent and scholarly until you get caught red-handed? That fancy fake school letter don't mean nothing when we got reliable witnesses seeing you steal from honest customers. We know exactly what you are." When James Wilson grabbed Sophia's arms roughly to prevent her from leaving, applying unnecessary force that would leave bruises on her upper arms, the MIT letter fell from her trembling hands onto the cold marble floor. The document that represented years of academic excellence, countless hours of studying, and her dreams of changing the world through engineering innovation, now lay forgotten and trampled by the feet of curious onlookers who had gathered to witness her humiliation. Within minutes, Officer Michael Reeves of the DuPage County Police Department arrived on the scene, his patrol car's red and blue lights flashing outside the store and drawing even more attention to the spectacle. Reeves was a 20-year veteran of local law enforcement with a reputation for aggressive policing tactics, particularly in communities of color. His hand rested casually on his service weapon as he assessed the situation with cold, calculating eyes that had already determined Sophia's guilt before hearing a single word of testimony. Without asking for Sophia's side of the story, without examining any evidence, without even looking at the MIT letter lying on the floor, he immediately began applying handcuffs to her wrists with unnecessary force that made her gasp in pain. "Please, officer, these handcuffs are too tight. They're cutting into my skin," Sophia whispered through gritted teeth as the metal restraints bit into her flesh, but Reeves ignored her completely as if she hadn't spoken at all. The pain was excruciating and immediate. Sophia could feel the metal edges cutting through her skin like small knives, and blood began to seep from the wounds where the handcuffs were applied with deliberate excessive force. Drops of crimson began falling onto her MIT acceptance letter lying on the floor, staining the white paper that represented everything she'd worked for throughout her academic career. Each drop of blood seemed to symbolize how quickly someone's entire future could be dismissed and destroyed by prejudice, false accusations, and systemic racism. Desperate to make them understand who she really was and what a terrible mistake they were making, Sophia spoke with the dignified, controlled voice her mother had taught her to use in crisis situations, the same voice Isabella Johnson used when briefing Pentagon officials on classified military operations. "Officer, I need to call my mother immediately. She's Major Isabella Johnson of the United States Army Special Forces, currently stationed at Fort Liberty in North Carolina. This is all a terrible misunderstanding that can be cleared up very quickly if you'll just allow me to contact her." The reaction was swift, brutal, and designed to completely destroy any remaining shred of dignity or hope Sophia might have possessed. Officer Reeves let out a harsh, mocking laugh that seemed to echo through the store and attract even more unwanted attention from curious shoppers. His voice dripped with racial contempt and 20 years of accumulated prejudice as he delivered his crushing response. "Oh sure, sweetheart, and I bet your daddy's the President of the United States too, right? Let me guess, your whole family's made up of military heroes and government officials. Listen here, you little lying ghetto rat, I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've heard every pathetic sob story and fantasy tale you people can come up with. What's your mama really do when she's not playing pretend soldier? Clean toilets at the army base, flip burgers in the commissary cafeteria. Or maybe she's one of those welfare queens who got knocked up by some soldier and now plays dress up in surplus store uniforms to scam benefits from the government." The crowd's reaction was mixed but equally damaging to Sophia's spirit and reputation. Some people laughed along with Reeves, their cruel chuckles filling the air like poisonous gas and encouraging his continued verbal assault. Others looked visibly uncomfortable but remained silent, unwilling to challenge a police officer's authority or defend a young black woman they didn't know. Most simply continued filming with their phones instead of offering any help to a teenager who was clearly in distress and bleeding from her restraints. The whispered comments from the gathering crowd cut through the air like additional weapons aimed at destroying her character. "Poor kid's really desperate if she's making up military stories like that. Military family my ass, look at where she's from. Probably learned to lie and steal from her parents. I bet that college letter is fake too." These kids are getting more creative with their scams. But despite the physical pain, the emotional trauma, and the public humiliation, Sophia maintained her composure and dignity exactly as her mother had taught her during their many conversations about surviving in hostile environments. Through her tears, she recited the information exactly as Isabella had drilled into her memory during childhood preparedness exercises. Major Isabella Johnson, United States Army Special Forces, Fort Liberty, North Carolina. Her emergency contact number is 50138799942. Her commanding officer is Colonel Martinez. Her security clearance is top secret/SC. She has served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan and has been decorated with the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. Reeves just shook his head in mock pity, his voice taking on the condescending tone of someone addressing a delusional child. You really think rattling off some random numbers and military jargon you probably found on Google is going to help you? Kid, you're going down for theft, assault and whatever other charges I can think of, and all the made-up military families in the world ain't gonna save your sorry ass. You picked the wrong white lady to steal from today, and now you're going to learn what happens when you people try to take what doesn't belong to you. The handcuffs continued to bite deeper into Sophia's wrists with every small movement, and more blood dripped steadily onto the MIT letter that now lay forgotten and stained on the cold mall floor. Every drop seemed to symbolize not just her individual suffering, but the systematic destruction of dreams and potential that occurred whenever prejudice was allowed to masquerade as justice. Meanwhile, 750 miles away at Fort Liberty in North Carolina, Major Isabella Johnson was reviewing classified tactical reports in a secure briefing room when her encrypted military phone vibrated with an incoming call from Sophia's number. The secure facility buzzed with the constant activity of military personnel conducting the business of national defense, but Isabella's world stopped completely when she saw her daughter's name on the caller ID. Sophia never called during school hours unless something was seriously wrong, and the timing of this call sent immediate alarm bells through Isabella's trained military instincts. Isabella had been in the military for 15 years, rising through the ranks to become one of the few black women in special forces through a combination of exceptional skill, unwavering determination, and the kind of courage that had earned her multiple commendations for valor under fire. She'd faced enemy combatants in Afghanistan without flinching, commanded respect in Pentagon briefings with 4-star generals, led classified operations in hostile territory, and earned a chest full of medals through blood, sweat and sacrifice in service to her country. But nothing in her extensive military training had prepared her for the broken, terrified sound of her daughter's voice coming through the phone. "Mama, I need help. I'm at Oakbrook Center Mall, and they have me in handcuffs. A woman accused me of stealing her AirPods and they won't listen to me or check the security cameras. The handcuffs are cutting my wrists and I'm bleeding. Everyone here thinks I'm lying about who you are, and they're calling me horrible names, Mama. Really terrible names that I don't want to repeat." In that moment, the decorated war hero who had commanded respect in the world's most dangerous combat zones felt her blood turn to ice while simultaneously catching fire with protective rage. Her mind immediately shifted into the tactical combat mode that had kept her alive through multiple deployments in enemy territory, calculating distances, available aircraft, potential resources, and strategic responses with the same deadly efficiency that had made her one of the military's most valuable special operations assets. "Baby girl, Mama's coming right now. I'm going to use every contact I have to get there as fast as possible. You hold your head high, and remember everything I taught you about maintaining dignity under fire. They picked the wrong family to mess with today, and I'm going to show them exactly who they're dealing with." Isabella's extensive military training kicked in immediately as she began calculating the logistics of her response. Distance from Fort Liberty to Chicago, approximately 750 miles. Commercial flight time with connections approximately 4 hours. But Isabella had something better than commercial aviation fronts. She had 15 years of military contacts and a network of law enforcement professionals who owed her favors. Within minutes, Isabella had contacted the FBI field office in Chicago through her security clearance network, explaining that her dependent daughter was being illegally detained and subjected to excessive force in a potential civil rights violation that required immediate federal intervention. Her commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, had served with Isabella in combat and trusted her judgment completely. When she explained that her daughter was bleeding from improperly applied restraints while being subjected to racist verbal abuse, he immediately approved emergency leave and provided access to military legal support. Isabella's next call was to Chicago FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, whom she had worked with on a joint military-civilian counterterrorism operation 2 years earlier. Chen immediately activated federal civil rights investigators and coordinated with local authorities to ensure that the situation was handled with appropriate federal oversight. As Isabella suited up in her full Special Forces uniform, every ribbon, medal, and insignia precisely placed to display her 15 years of distinguished service and multiple combat decorations, she coordinated with a network of military and law enforcement contacts who could provide backup support. Her dress uniform was a visual biography of courage and sacrifice, the silver star for gallantry in action during enemy contact, the bronze star with red device for valor in ground combat, the purple heart for wounds received while engaging hostile forces, the combat action badge, the expert infantry badge, airborne wings, and numerous other decorations that told the story of a warrior who had earned respect through blood and sacrifice. Isabella chartered a private aircraft that could make the trip to Chicago in under 3 hours, using personal funds and calling in favors from aviation contacts she had developed during her military career. This wasn't just about her daughter anymore, this was about every military family, every person of color, every innocent person who had been presumed guilty because of their appearance or background. The aircraft's engines roared with the sound of approaching justice as Isabella reviewed tactical maps and coordinated with ground support personnel who would meet her at the landing zone. Back at the mall, the situation had deteriorated even further. Sophia had been moved to the cramped security office where she sat handcuffed to a metal chair, her wrists now bleeding freely from the overly tight restraints that had been applied with deliberate cruelty. The small room reeked of stale coffee, unwashed uniforms, and the power-drunk authority of people who enjoyed exercising control over those they perceived as powerless. Officer Reeves stood over her with unconcealed contempt, occasionally making additional racist comments designed to break her spirit completely. Charlotte Thompson sat comfortably in a padded chair in the corner, occasionally glancing at her phone and scrolling through social media with the satisfied expression of someone whose cruel plan was proceeding exactly as intended. She had positioned herself as the victim while simultaneously destroying a young person's future, and she was clearly enjoying every moment of Sophia's suffering. "Still waiting for that special forces mama of yours," Reeves taunted, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who believed he held all the power and faced no consequences for his actions. "Maybe she's stuck in traffic on her way back from her cleaning job at McDonald's. Or maybe she don't exist at all, just like that fake college letter of yours and all the other lies you've been telling." Sophia said nothing in response, drawing strength from her mother's extensive training about maintaining dignity and composure in the face of adversity. She knew with absolute certainty that her mother was coming, and she knew that when Major Isabella Johnson arrived, everything would change dramatically. The blood from her wrists had started to pool on the chair beneath her and drip onto the floor, but she refused to give these people the satisfaction of seeing her break under their coordinated assault. The mall's head security guard, Dennis Parker, had been reviewing additional security footage at Reeves's request, hoping to find additional evidence to support Charlotte's accusation. But the more footage he reviewed, the more uncomfortable he became with the situation. The cameras clearly showed Sophia browsing peacefully, examining products and attempting to make a legitimate purchase. There was no evidence of theft, no suspicious behavior, no interaction with Charlotte Thompson until the accusation was made. Parker was beginning to suspect that a serious mistake had been made, but Reeves had made it clear that questioning his judgment would not be tolerated. 3 hours after receiving Sophia's desperate phone call, the automatic doors of Oakbrook Center Mall parted like the Red Sea as Major Isabella Johnson entered the building. Even in her full military dress uniform with its array of combat ribbons, special forces insignia, and airborne qualifications, there was no mistaking the lethal confidence and commanding presence of someone who had earned respect in the world's most dangerous places. Her 6-foot frame moved with the purposeful precision of a seasoned combat veteran, her green eyes scanning the environment with tactical awareness as she navigated through curious shoppers toward the security office. Every step Isabella took seemed to command involuntary attention from the people around her, though most couldn't quite understand why their subconscious minds were responding to her presence. Store employees straightened unconsciously as she passed, responding instinctively to 15 years of military bearing and command presence without realizing what they were reacting to. Children pointed at her impressive array of ribbons and medals while their parents quickly pulled them along, and several veterans in the crowd immediately recognized the significance of her decorations and rank insignia. When she reached the security office, Isabella didn't bother with the courtesy of knocking eyes. She simply opened the door and stepped inside with the authority of someone accustomed to entering hostile territory and taking immediate control of chaotic situations. The room fell silent as she surveyed the scene with tactical precision, her daughter handcuffed and bleeding from multiple wounds, Officer Reeves standing in a position of aggressive authority, Charlotte Thompson looking up from her phone with sudden unease, and the general atmosphere of abuse and intimidation that filled the small space. But Reeves, still drunk on his perceived power and convinced he was dealing with another upset parent who could be easily dismissed, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Ma'am, you're gonna have to wait outside in the mall. We're conducting a criminal investigation here, and civilians aren't allowed in the security office." Isabella's voice, when she spoke, carried the same tone she used to brief Pentagon officials on classified operations and coordinate with NATO allies on international missions. "I'm Major Isabella Johnson, United States Army Special Forces, and I'm Sophia's mother. I want those handcuffs removed from my daughter immediately, and I want medical attention for her injuries right now. I also want a complete review of all security footage and a full explanation of why a minor was restrained without evidence of wrongdoing." Reeves finally looked up from his desk, taking in her uniform but remaining dismissive because his prejudices ran deeper than respect for military service. "Look, lady, I don't care if you're wearing a Halloween costume, borrowed somebody's uniform from the Army surplus store, or got that outfit from some military girlfriend. Your daughter is being detained for theft investigation, and we'll handle the restraints when we're finished questioning her. Playing dress-up soldier ain't gonna change the facts or get you special treatment." Several people in the growing crowd that had gathered outside the security office began whispering among themselves as word spread that the accused girl's mother had arrived in military uniform. "That uniform looks pretty official to me. Wait, is she actually military? Nah, probably just some costume. You can buy anything online these days. But look at all those ribbons and badges, that's a lot of detail for a fake." Isabella reached into her uniform pocket and placed her military identification on the table, positioning it so everyone in the room could see the rank, special classifications, security clearance levels, and official photograph. The laminated card gleamed under the fluorescent lights, displaying credentials that represented years of training, combat experience, and classified operations that few civilians ever encountered. Major Isabella Johnson, United States Army Special Forces, currently stationed at Fort Liberty, with top-secret/SCI security clearance. I've served 3 combat tours in Afghanistan, commanded special operations teams in classified missions across multiple theaters of operation, and briefed 4-star generals on matters of national security. I hold the Silver Star for gallantry, the Bronze Star for valor, and the Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Now remove those handcuffs from my daughter before this situation escalates beyond your ability to control it." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Reeves stared at the identification card, his face slowly draining of color as the reality of his situation began to penetrate his prejudice-clouded judgment. William Davis shifted uncomfortably, while sweat began beading on his forehead, and Charlotte Thompson suddenly found great interest in examining her manicured nails as she realized her cruel game was about to backfire spectacularly. The transformation in power dynamics was immediate and unmistakable, but Reeves, perhaps sensing that his career was already in serious jeopardy, decided to double down on his position with the desperation of someone who had nothing left to lose. "Playing the military card doesn't change procedure, lady. I don't care what your fancy government ID says, or how many ribbons you've got pinned to that costume. We have a credible accusation from a reliable witness, and we're handling this by the book according to standard operating procedures." He gestured toward Charlotte with renewed defiance, his voice rising as he tried to maintain authority in a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond his control. "This is still America, and the law applies to everyone equally regardless of what uniform you're wearing or what connections you think you have." Isabella's expression didn't change, but her voice took on the steely quality familiar to those who had served under her command in life-or-death combat situations. "What book would that be, Officer Reeves? The one that says you detain and handcuff minors without evidence of wrongdoing? The one that says you ignore requests to review security footage that could immediately resolve the situation? The one that encourages you to apply restraints tightly enough to cause bleeding and potential permanent nerve damage? Or perhaps the one that allows you to make racist comments to a 17-year-old honor student while she's restrained and helpless?" She turned toward William Davis, who was now visibly sweating despite the air conditioning, and looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "Mr. Davis, I assume your store has written corporate policies regarding theft accusations and customer treatment. Don't those policies require verification through security footage before any detention occurs? Have you reviewed that footage, or were you too busy making assumptions about my daughter based on her appearance and race? Davis's face flushed bright red as he stammered a response, his voice shaking with the realization that his actions were being scrutinized by someone with the authority and connections to destroy his career. We don't necessarily need to check footage when we have an eyewitness account from a reliable customer. Company policy says we can detain suspected shoplifters when we have credible witness testimony. Isabella's gaze shifted to Charlotte Thompson, who was now desperately trying to avoid eye contact while scrolling frantically through her phone as if looking for an escape route. And you, Mrs. Thompson, are so certain my daughter took your property that you're willing to testify to that under oath in federal court, knowing that false accusations carry serious criminal penalties, including potential hate crime charges that could result in years in federal prison. The threat hung in the air like a sword ready to fall as Charlotte squirmed uncomfortably in her chair, suddenly realizing that her cruel game had consequences she hadn't considered. Before she could formulate a response, Isabella made a call on her secure military communication device. "This is Major Johnson, authorization code Bravo 779er Echo. I need immediate federal intervention at Oakbrook Center Mall in Illinois. Full spectrum analysis using all available camera angles, with FBI and military intelligence support as needed." Within minutes, mall security personnel arrived with access to the complete surveillance system, accompanied by 2 FBI agents who had been dispatched through Isabella's security clearance network, and 2 DuPage County Sheriff's investigators who had been contacted through federal law enforcement channels. The arrival of federal authorities transformed what had been a local incident into a potential federal civil rights case with national implications. As the security team began reviewing footage from multiple angles throughout the store, something remarkable emerged from a camera system that Charlotte hadn't noticed during her careful planning. A small high-definition security device, mounted discreetly near the ceiling, had captured her entire performance in crystal-clear detail, from an angle that showed her deliberate deception with courtroom-quality evidence. The footage played like a movie revealing the villain's true nature, and the room fell absolutely silent as everyone watched Charlotte deliberately positioning herself away from the main security camera, while secretly placing her unopened AirPods Pro into her own purse. The video showed her glancing around systematically to ensure she had an adequate audience, checking her appearance in a store mirror, and then launching into her dramatic accusation with the calculated precision of someone who had clearly done this before. "Well," Isabella said with the calm precision of someone delivering a mission briefing, "it appears we have a very different story than what was initially reported." That's when Charlotte's designer handbag began emitting the unmistakable ringtone of an iPhone receiving a text message. The sound seemed to echo through the small office like a death knell as everyone turned to stare at her with growing realization. Charlotte's face, artificially tightened by years of expensive cosmetic procedures, contorted in panic as she hurriedly dug through her bag in a desperate attempt to silence the incriminating sound. But instead of just her phone, she extracted the very AirPods Pro she had claimed were stolen, still in their original packaging, with the security seal intact. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and angry comments as Charlotte held the evidence of her own lie in her trembling hands. Her carefully constructed world of privilege and entitlement crumbled faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane, as the FBI agents began taking photographs of the evidence and documenting her contradictory statements. "I must have been stressed and confused. Everyone makes mistakes when they're upset and not thinking clearly. This whole thing just got blown out of proportion because of a simple misunderstanding," Charlotte stammered desperately, her voice shaking with fear as she tried to minimize the situation, while her eyes darted around the room looking for sympathy or support that wasn't coming. But a voice from the crowd that had gathered outside the office cut through her excuses like a knife through paper. An elderly black veteran wearing a Vietnam War cap stepped forward with anger burning in his eyes. "Mistakes don't put a kid in handcuffs, lady. Mistakes don't make a teenager bleed for something she didn't do. What you did was deliberate, calculated evil, and you need to own up to it instead of making excuses." The comment seemed to crystallize the growing anger in the crowd as other voices joined in with increasing volume and moral outrage. "That girl's been bleeding this whole time because of your lies. You made this up on purpose to destroy her." This is sick, she's just a kid trying to buy school supplies. You should be ashamed of yourself. Isabella's voice remained calm but carried throughout the now packed security office as she addressed Charlotte directly with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. No, Mrs. Thompson, my daughter has been bleeding from handcuffs that were applied without cause based on your false accusation. She was publicly humiliated, accused of a crime without evidence, and subjected to racist verbal abuse that was designed to destroy her dignity and future. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty designed to harm an innocent child because you didn't think she belonged in the same space as you. Officer Reeves, realizing that his 20-year career was now in serious jeopardy and facing the possibility of federal charges, attempted one final desperate move to save himself. His face was flushed red with a mixture of embarrassment, rage and growing panic as he grabbed for his radio with shaking hands. This is completely out of proportion. We received a complaint from a reliable witness and responded according to standard procedure. I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I'm not going to be lectured by some military show-off who thinks her uniform gives her special privileges. At that moment, Isabella's secure phone rang with an incoming call that she immediately put on speaker for everyone in the room to hear. Major Johnson, this is Chief Garcia of the DuPage County Sheriff's Office. I've been briefed on the situation involving your daughter by federal authorities and my Internal Affairs Division. Officer Reeves is suspended immediately pending a full investigation into his conduct, use of excessive force, falsification of equipment reports, and the racist language that has been documented on multiple witness cell phone videos that are already circulating on social media. Reeves's face went from red to white as the reality of his situation hit him like a freight train. His hands began shaking uncontrollably as he realized that his 20-year career was about to end in complete disgrace, and his pension was likely gone forever. This is bullshit, he exploded, his composure finally cracking completely as spittle flew from his lips. You can't do this to me. I've got a wife and kids to feed. 20 years of faithful service to this department, and you're going to throw it all away because some people can't handle the truth about their own kind. This is reverse racism. This is political correctness gone crazy. Chief Garcia's voice came through the phone speaker with cold professional authority that brooked no argument. Officer Reeves, you will surrender your badge and service weapon immediately to the Internal Affairs investigators who are standing by. Your racist comments have been recorded by multiple witnesses and will be used as evidence in both your disciplinary hearing and the federal civil rights investigation that is now being opened by the Department of Justice. 2 Internal Affairs investigators who had arrived with the Sheriff's Department stepped forward to collect Reeves's badge and gun. His face was a mask of fury, disbelief, and growing desperation as he was forced to hand over the symbols of authority he had abused for so many years. 20 fucking years, he shouted as his badge was confiscated, his voice echoing through the security office and out into the mall where dozens of shoppers stopped to stare. 20 years protecting this community from thugs and criminals, and this is what I get, because I arrested some little ghetto rat who happened to be black. This is what's wrong with America today. Criminals get more protection than the police. The investigators remained professional as they escorted him toward the exit, but Reeves continued his profanity-laced tirade that was being recorded by dozens of cell phone cameras. His final words as he was led away would later become part of a viral video that would end any chance he had of working in law enforcement ever again. You're all going to regret this, when crime goes through the roof because we can't do our jobs anymore. Remember this moment. Remember when you chose to protect criminals over cops. Charlotte Thompson's situation deteriorated even more rapidly as the FBI agents began processing evidence and taking statements from witnesses. The security footage had been copied and preserved by multiple agencies, and additional cameras throughout the mall had captured her entering the store, selecting her target, and executing her plan with premeditated malice. When the handcuffs were placed on her wrists, the same type that had cut into Sophia's skin, Charlotte's entitled facade finally cracked completely. Do you know who my husband is? She shrieked as she was being processed for arrest, her voice reaching a pitch that could probably be heard throughout the entire mall. He's Richard Thompson of Thompson, Blackwell, and Price, one of the most prestigious law firms in Chicago. You can't treat me like this. I'm not some common criminal. This is all being blown out of proportion. But the crowd that had gathered to watch her arrest had no sympathy for her desperate pleas. Someone in the crowd shouted back with righteous anger, "Maybe your fancy lawyer husband can visit you in federal prison, lady." Another voice added, "You should have thought about that before you tried to destroy that girl's life." As Charlotte was escorted through the mall in handcuffs, dozens of cell phone cameras captured every moment of her humiliation. The woman who had strutted into tech world with arrogance and entitlement was now crying and pleading as she faced the consequences of her actions. Within hours, the video would go viral across multiple social media platforms with captions like "Racist Karen gets arrested after framing black teen" and "Rich white woman learns actions have consequences." William Davis faced his own reckoning when corporate headquarters was contacted about the incident. A review of security footage from multiple tech world locations revealed a disturbing pattern of discriminatory practices under his management. Statistics showed that under Davis's leadership, Black and Hispanic customers were followed, questioned, and reported to security at rates nearly 10 times higher than white customers with similar browsing patterns. The evidence of systematic racial profiling was so overwhelming that corporate had no choice but to terminate him immediately. "I was just following company guidelines about loss prevention," Davis protested weakly as he cleaned out his office under security escort. "I never told anyone to target specific types of customers." But the recorded evidence told a different story. Employee testimony, internal emails, and training materials all pointed to a culture of discrimination that Davis had not only allowed but actively encouraged. His termination was announced to all store employees as an example of what would happen to anyone who engaged in discriminatory practices. The mall's parent company faced mounting pressure from shareholders, advocacy groups, and potential boycotts. Social media campaigns calling for justice had gained hundreds of thousands of supporters within hours, and the company's stock price was already beginning to drop as investors worried about the financial impact of discrimination lawsuits. The corporate response was swift and comprehensive: an immediate overhaul of security protocols, termination of contracts with any vendor found to have engaged in discriminatory practices, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to monitor customer treatment. As the handcuffs were finally removed from Sophia's wrists and paramedics provided medical attention for her injuries, Isabella knelt beside her daughter while emergency medical technicians cleaned and bandaged the cuts. The wounds were deeper than they initially appeared, requiring multiple stitches and leaving scars that would serve as permanent reminders of this traumatic day. "How are you holding up, baby girl?" Isabella asked softly, her voice filled with a mixture of pride, anger, and protective love. Sophia looked at her freshly bandaged wrists, then at the crowd of people who had initially assumed the worst about her based on nothing more than her appearance, and finally at her mother's face, which showed both fierce pride and barely contained rage. "I'm okay, Mama. The physical pain will heal, but I keep thinking about something important. How many other kids go through this exact same thing without having a special forces mother to save them? How many brilliant young people have their dreams destroyed by people like Charlotte Thompson and Officer Reeves? This can't just end with us getting justice. We have to make sure this doesn't happen to others." Isabella smiled with the same intense pride she'd felt when receiving her Purple Heart after being wounded in combat, knowing that Sophia's moral courage and determination would ultimately save more lives and change more hearts than any military operation she had ever conducted. "You're absolutely right, sweetheart. What do you want to do about it?" Over the following months, Sophia made a decision that surprised many adults around her and demonstrated wisdom far beyond her 17 years. Instead of accepting the substantial financial settlement that both Tech World and Oakbrook Center offered, she chose to pursue systemic change through a carefully planned 18-month initiative. Working with her mother's network of military legal contacts, established civil rights organizations like the NAACP and ACLU, her school district's diversity committee, and local community leaders, Sophia became the public face of a comprehensive anti-discrimination program. The initiative started modestly with partnerships between 3 local high schools and the DuPage County Community Council, focusing on educating young people about their rights and providing resources for reporting discrimination. The program expanded over 6 months to include Northwestern University's Social Justice Department, the Illinois Retail Association, and the Chicago Urban League. Together they developed training modules that were piloted in 20 retail locations across the Chicago metropolitan area. Store employees received certification in bias recognition, proper procedures for handling theft accusations, and the legal consequences of discrimination based on race, ethnicity, or appearance. By the 12-month mark, the security training program that used Sophia's case as a central teaching example had been adopted by 3 major retail chains and was being reviewed by the National Retail Federation for potential nationwide implementation. The program's success was measured not just in policy changes, but in documented reductions in discriminatory incidents and increased customer satisfaction scores across participating locations. Sophia's robotics innovations, which had been temporarily delayed by her traumatic experience, eventually flourished with funding support from MIT's engineering department, the Army Research Laboratory, and private technology grants. Her disaster relief robots, designed to navigate through earthquake rubble and locate survivors using thermal imaging and sound detection, began field testing with emergency response teams in California and were later deployed in actual disaster zones, saving lives during hurricanes and building collapses. 1 year after the incident that had nearly destroyed her faith in justice, Sophia stood confidently at the podium in MIT's most prestigious lecture hall, addressing an audience of students, faculty, visiting dignitaries, and media representatives from around the country. Her mother sat proudly in the front row wearing her dress uniform for the ceremony where Sophia was receiving a national award for civil rights advocacy and technological innovation. The scars on Sophia's wrists had faded to thin white lines that were barely visible unless someone looked closely, but they served as permanent reminders of how close she had come to having her future destroyed by hatred, prejudice, and systematic injustice. When I was 17 years old, Sophia began, her voice clear, strong, and carrying the confidence of someone who had survived the worst and emerged stronger. I carried scars on my wrists into this very institution. Those scars came from handcuffs that were placed on me without justification because someone looked at a black girl with big dreams and automatically assumed she couldn't possibly belong in spaces of excellence and achievement. The audience of over 500 people listened in complete silence as Sophia continued her remarks, but those scars are exactly why I build machines to save lives today. They remind me every morning when I wake up that innovation without justice is meaningless, that technology should serve everyone equally, especially those who have been historically left behind or pushed out of opportunities. They remind me that excellence isn't just about grades or test scores, it's about using your abilities to make the world more fair and more just for everyone who comes after you. The audience rose in a thunderous standing ovation that lasted for nearly 2 minutes as Sophia paused to collect her thoughts and control her emotions. I could have accepted money to stay quiet about what happened to me. I could have taken a settlement, moved on with my life, and pretended that systematic racism was someone else's problem to solve. But I learned from my mother, who served multiple combat tours to protect the ideals of equality and justice that America claims to represent, that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought with weapons or military force, but with dignity, truth, persistence, and the moral courage to demand that our society actually live up to its highest principles and stated values. Isabella wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her daughter command the room with the same natural authority she had seen in military briefings with 4-star generals and Pentagon officials. Sophia had grown from a brilliant but traumatized teenager into a powerful advocate for social change, and her impact was already being felt across the country and around the world. My mother taught me that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields overseas, but in the everyday moments when we refuse to accept injustice as normal, Sophia said, looking directly at Isabella with obvious love and gratitude. When we choose to fight for systemic change instead of personal comfort, when we transform our own pain into protection for others, and when we have the courage to demand that things be better for everyone who comes after us. After the ceremony, mother and daughter walked together through the MIT campus on a beautiful spring evening, surrounded by other brilliant students from all backgrounds who now had a measurably better chance of pursuing their dreams without fear of discrimination. Their story had become much more than just a viral video or trending news headline. It had evolved into a comprehensive blueprint for how individual courage, when supported by community involvement and institutional backing, could create lasting systemic change that protected future generations from the same prejudices that had nearly destroyed one brilliant young woman's faith in justice and equality.
The mentorship program that Sophia had helped create was now supporting over 300 students annually across 12 states, providing them with legal resources, advocacy training, educational support, and emotional counseling when they faced discrimination in academic or professional settings. The policy changes implemented because of her case had prevented countless other young people from experiencing similar injustices, and the security training programs had saved retail companies millions of dollars in discrimination lawsuits while creating safer, more welcoming environments for customers of all backgrounds. In electronic stores, shopping malls, and retail establishments across the country, new policies and procedures ensured that the next time a young person walked in with dreams of changing the world through science and technology, they would be met with encouragement rather than suspicion, understanding rather than prejudice, opportunity rather than false accusations, and respect rather than racial stereotyping. The changes weren't perfect, and they weren't universal, but they were real, measurable, and growing stronger every year. For Sophia Johnson, that outcome represented exactly what she had fought for through months of legal proceedings, media interviews, and public speaking engagements. The chance for every young person to be judged by their character, abilities, and potential rather than by the color of their skin or the assumptions of those who didn't take the time to see their brilliance and humanity. As she continued her studies at MIT, developing new technologies that would save lives in disasters around the world, while simultaneously working to dismantle the systems that had nearly destroyed her own dreams, those faded scars on her wrists served as daily reminders that sometimes the most important victories in life come from the moments when we refuse to let injustice have the last word, when we choose hope over bitterness, and when we transform our worst experiences into fuel for creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.